He challenged me. He said, you should meet 2 or 3 people every day.
We're talking about how to level up on LinkedIn and engagement, being the go-giver, the idea that being open to opportunity.
We all deal with challenges, but how do you overcome that?
Master Connector with Steve Spiro is live on air.
All right, welcome everybody to the Master Connector Show. I'm Rob Genovesi. I'm co-host of the show. And I'm so happy to be here because every week we are coming at you with some great guests, talking to them, asking them questions about their lives, their journeys, networking, inspiration, a whole lot of great stuff. Hope you all had a great Thanksgiving. Certainly, we're grateful for all of you who tune into the show and for all the guests that come here. But we come at you again. After having a week off, it feels weird, but we're back here and excited again for a new show. But this is the Master Connector Show, and I'm going to bring up Steve Spiro himself. He is the Master Connector, and as you all know, if you've watched us before, Steve and I go back about 27 years or so, and what I love about our story is that we were similar dudes coming from a similar introverted, shy place in our lives as adults, but we had a similar mentor and we learned how to network in more of a raw kind of way. He and I do organized networking now, but back then it was like, hey, Rob, hey, Steve, go out there and meet people. And for us, especially me, I was scared to death. I don't know that Steve was scared to death. Steve, by the way, if you don't know, he's got several black belts in a couple of different martial arts disciplines. So I don't know if he was as scared as I was, but he certainly mastered the connecting part of it. And he was challenged to meet several people every single day out there in the real world, not just on LinkedIn. So he does that as a matter of routine and a matter of lifestyle almost. He's always meeting new people. It's one of the overcoming stories that people love to hear, because if he can do it, you can do it. If I can do it, you can do it. You always want to be connecting, meeting new people. That's how you level up in life. That's how you expand your life. So help me bring him to the show, the Master Connector Show, the Master Connector himself, Mr. Steve Spiro. What's up, pal?
What's going on, Rob G? Great to have you on here. Listen, we are so blessed to have you as part of the show. I just got to say, you are an amazing addition, and it's so cool having 27 years of history together. And yeah, the original Steve, the OG, right? And I know the OG Rob too. So it's crazy. It's an amazing history together, but we're excited, and I appreciate the kind words. And if you haven't gotten to know Rob, you definitely need to get to know him for sure. He has got an incredible heart, amazing family man, incredible brander, and real inspiration, because I literally, and I'll get into some of the topic today, but I was like on LinkedIn a lot, but he's the guy who said, Steve, you need to, if you want to connect with people, you want to be a speaker, you should start doing some videos. So he got me on that journey, and I literally started taking out my iPhone and started recording stuff. And I appreciate you, Rob, because you put me on that path. And then that, of course, that kind of led to the show and how that came about. So a lot of this has to do with you, sir. Obviously, Cameron Toth, we miss Cameron being on here with us, but we appreciate the history there and what he's done with us in terms of getting, I know, Rob, you're responsible for introducing me to Cameron, actually, because, you and I knew each other for years. You invited me to a networking meeting, and guess who was there? Cameron Toth was there. And that's where that relationship was born. So all about connecting, all about relationships, always. All about networking. But anyway, what's going on, friends? Steve Spiro, the Master Connector, coming at you live and direct. And, let me ask you a question here. What's your purpose here on this big ball of mud, right? On this blue marble here? Is it to make an impact? I know it is for me. Hey, what's going on, Amy? Great to see you. Glad you're on here. So blessed to have you on here. Yeah. And listen, so for me, for years and years and years, I was very self-focused. I was wounded, as Rob said, not only, just introverted, but picked on, bullied, learning disabled, dyslexic, super low self-esteem. And I was wounded. I don't mean physically necessarily, although getting picked on, and I got into a lot of fights and most of the time didn't win. So yeah, there was some wounds, but it was a lot of emotional wounds. And And so, when you're wounded, the only thing you're thinking about is self-preservation, is just protecting yourself, and you're not thinking about other people. But what happened is the more I started to get healed, and as Rob said, got a couple of black belts that helped with the confidence side a little bit. But I still, meeting people. Are you kidding me? Getting out there and talking to people. The mentor he's speaking about, who's actually going to be coming to my place today, he challenged me to three strangers every day, and that's ridiculous, but the more I started to become others focused, and the more I started to become comfortable within my skin, and actually started to share some of my challenges, some of my vulnerabilities, what happened is people started to relate, and the factor that Rob talked about, that if I could do it, you could do it, factor came into play, and I found myself inspiring people, and I found, I won't say that, it saved lives, although maybe to a degree in some ways. I've had people tell me, because I've been blessed to be mentored, I've blessed to, pay that forward and mentor other people. And I've gotten messages, and people have told me personally, hey, our marriage was saved because of the influence you had in our life. And, we've be eternally saved in ways. So yeah, maybe it can save lives, but certainly it could change lives for sure. And we all have a story to tell. I want you to make sure, as you listen to today's topic, think about your story, because you make a difference. There's something that you have that you could talk about. And let's be honest, it sometimes takes somebody, perhaps it's somebody like Tim, somebody like Rob, myself, or maybe somebody out there, who can help you figure out kind of the best way to articulate your story. I tell my story every Connect call I do, and often when I'm asked to speak on podcasts, and often as a keynote, and it's not a random thing. I don't just speak randomly, right? It's too important for that. But when you come up with ways in which you can articulate your story, and that's important. And because honestly, the truth is, especially when I do these Connect calls, your first impression can also be your last impression, right? It's that one impression, and you want to make sure it's a good impression. So I recommend don't be random. I put a post out today in terms of video messaging and telling your story. And, a great way to tell you to start a video message is to start with that story. And, again, something that's heartfelt, something that moves people necessarily, one of the things I want to make sure is when you tell your story and you kind of share a little bit about yourself, it breaks walls down. You get to connect with people better. And but so, like I said before, if you don't feel like you're worthy, I want you to know you are, and your story can also change lives, maybe save lives, but certainly change lives, because everyone has a story to tell. So if you're ready for my co-host, my man, Mr. Rob G, to introduce our amazing guest, I want you to type in the comments right now. Let's go. And by the way, we're LinkedIn participants, not LinkedIn lurkers. So get in there. We want to hear from you. Again, we only see a number. We don't know, okay, whatever number it is, we don't know if you're here watching unless you get in the comments. By the way, it's also a great way for you to connect with each other. So let's get in there and let's go. Great. I'll pass it to you, Mr. Robbie G.
All right. Thanks, Steve. So good to be here as always, and I'm excited for this guest today. Mr. Tim Jacobs is a native to the shoreline areas of Connecticut. He now resides in various locations along the East Coast with his wife, traveling and working from their RV motorhome. I mean, this guy's just on the road, literally. He has published 15 books, one of which was featured on C-SPAN, over 450 articles published in various newspapers and magazines, teaches classes on writing and publishing, and is currently the owner of JWC Publishing. He's the founder and former editor for Patriots of the American Revolution magazine and has been a freelance writer for over 35 years. Please welcome to the show, Mr. Tim Jacobs. Hey, Tim.
Hey, thank you for having me.
Good to have you.
Awesome. Yeah, wow. It is an honor to be on here with you, sir. And I know we were talking backstage how this is a little bit of a long, it was a long time coming, so to speak. But I'm glad we got this together for sure. And so we are a big part of our show. And by the way, I want to just give us some shout outs here. Just bear with me here. Dan, nice to see you, sir. Great having you on the show here. Yolanda, we're so blessed to have you back. We've been missing you for sure. Scott, awesome. Great seeing you here. And of course, I shout out Amy and Stuti's on. She's a fellow Master Networks person here. So again, I know there's more of you on. Get in the comments. This way you can connect with each other, right? And not be a lurker. Let's be a participant. But Dan, we want to talk about stories. So we want you to type in community #story and tell us a little bit about your backstory. Obviously, we've got limited time. We try to keep the show short and punchy, but let's hear a little bit of your backstory and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah. Just to say as quickly as possible, I've been writing and or in the arena of, publishing and editing ever since I can remember. If I go way back real quick to my childhood, when I was about 4 and 5 and I was learning my numbers, my mother would be typing from home. She would type labels for direct mailings long before we had home computers and printers. And when she got to that last column and row, she would let me type in that zip code. And I just grew up with that sound of the click clack of the typewriter for many, many years and just fell in love with that. And that's all I really wanted to do was be on a typewriter and recreate that sound. And from there, as I got older, I just started to, write poetry, write short stories, write novellas, and just kept developing, I guess, my craft. And then, fast forward to 1996, I wrote my first book, which was for the people that are in the New England area, the Goodspeed Opera House out of East Haddam, Connecticut. I researched and wrote the history of that. And from then on, I've just never stopped, never looked back.
That's amazing. I forgot that you're a fellow New Englander, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So definitely good to have another New Englander on here. You were telling on a little bit of your story. You're talking about typewriters, right? And so a couple of things. I just want to give a little humor here, if I could. So when I was going through school, the only person, and again, don't judge me. I'm definitely all for equal rights, and it's not. But growing up, the perception was you got to be a successful executive. You had a secretary, you had an admin person that did all the typing. So I did take a typing class, but I never paid attention. I was like, I'm not going to need this. Sure enough, of course I need it, right? So I get out into the real world, to the working world, and I start an advertising company with a partner. And guess what? He had an old-fashioned typewriter. We had to get stuff out. We had to type stuff. And when I started, I'm one finger hunt and peck guy, And
Yep.
back in the day, this is the typewriters, and we were cheap, right? So we didn't buy we waited to buy these ribbons, and younger people probably don't even know what I'm talking about, but it was basically it's just past the Stone Age when you would have to type things physically on a piece of paper versus you do them on the computer and you print them. Anyway, I used to have to hit the keyboard really hard because to get the impression of the word on the paper, I had to hit it really hard because the harder you hit the keyboard back then, this is before there was electronic version. No matter what, you touch the keyboard. Anyway, and so even today, when I'm on and anyone's near me listening to me on the keyboard, they're like, you pound those keyboards really hard. It's just a habit that I had. But anyway.
All you need to tell them is I type with purpose.
There you go. And it's interesting, right? So we were talking about impact, right? Not this kind of impact on the keyboard, but truly impact. So I want your community type in #impact. And here's my question. How is sharing your personal story impacted others? And what are the 3 most significant takeaways that you believe can change or save lives, if you will?
Yeah, I feel, we all go through the same events in life, whether that's marriage or the birth of a child or any, any type of tragedy like 9/11, those type of things. But we all have our own experience of what that did to us and what the outcome was. And basically by just capturing your story and putting that into a book, you can connect with people who are perhaps going through the same thing, because I think what happens subconsciously is when you're going through something, no matter how exciting or how at the time devastating, you think you're the only one going through it. And it is just there's that inner peaceful feeling if you're reading a book and you feel like, oh my God, this person wrote this book just for me because they know I'm going through it. when yet they wrote it for their own reasons, for maybe their own, therapy, maybe for just their own particular outcome, but it just resonates and it connects with people. I've worked with other people who, they wanted to write their memoir, basically to leave it for future generations. And that's something I tell people, you could tell your children's story, you could tell your grandchildren's story. Hopefully you're here to tell your great-grandchildren some stories. But what happens after that? You're relying on them to repeat your story. But imagine if these children can sit on their parents' lap. What was your great-grandfather like? Oh, well, let's look at the book he wrote. He could tell you in his own words. That is just a huge difference. I worked with a gentleman recently who is, at the time, was on the onset of dementia, and he knew that was happening, and he wanted to get his story done. And we had put all that together and got it in time for Christmas, and he gave away like 40 copies. And just to give you an idea what this gentleman was like, his name is Warren Fox, and he's in California. And one of his stories is he was 85 years old. He traveled to New Zealand and bungee jumped off of 52 stories.
At 85.
Yeah. And I said that. I asked him, I said, I have to ask you, what on earth prompted you to do that? And he goes, well, there's a two-part answer. Number one, no one was there to tell me not to do it. And number two, there was a bar across the street and I stopped there first.
There you go. A little liquid out,
but that's how he lived his life. He just was an adventure seeker long before that was kind of like a mainstream thing to do and to be. But, so how can that impact someone's life? It's going to impact the future generations that are going to come from, his sons and grandchildren and everything else. It's going to be like, why do I have this adventurous soul inside of me? Oh my God, I didn't realize my great-great-grandfather was this way.
Amazing. It's interesting, right? I've heard it said, if you want to know about somebody, right, you could get lots of great mentorship. You can get lots of great input by just going and studying, by reading their books, right? You may not necessarily have the opportunity, like someone like a Ben Franklin, or Theodore Roosevelt, or I read Harry Truman's book years back, and you can really get to know people and how it really can impact how you think through just reading their story. That's amazing.
Yeah. No, there's definitely inspiration, even like you mentioned, like biographies, I've read probably 2 different biographies on Walt Disney, and you wouldn't realize that guy was literally poor his whole life. And, it wasn't until he really started to get some movies going, and then he was able to get, we're all the same age, at least us 3 sitting here. We grew up every Sunday night. The Wonderful World of Walt Disney was on TV. And because of that, he had a viewership. He had what we today call the audience. And he was able to build Disneyland, which then turned into coming to the East Coast and building Disney World.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, and one of the things that you were telling the story about the gentleman with the bungee jumping, and there's a sense of authenticity there. There's a human aspect, and so big part of our show today is being authentic, connecting authentically. So I want you to type in #authenticity community. And by the way, if you haven't yet, make sure you put in the comments, besides authenticity, type in where you're from, what city, what state, what country, right? We want to know that part of you as well, because again, and feel free to, throw in what you do for work, or what are the many things that you do for work, like in my case, right? But anyway, so talk to us about authenticity. Tim, how has sharing your personal story revealed your human side, and what advice do you have for others looking to integrate authenticity into their professional lives?
Yeah, it definitely is like a self-reflection. Most people, I wouldn't say that they don't, but definitely if you sit down and decide, I'm going to write Steve's story, you're going to start self-reflecting. And the thing is, you're pulling up memories. You're pulling up how you reacted at certain times from those memories. And it's just like a whole snowball effect of, you're kind of digging deeper. And if you're working with someone, you're working with a writing coach or a ghostwriter, and someone's kind of helping you pull all this out, you start to even realize things that you might not have remembered. It's all of a sudden just all kind of cultivating and coming through. And the more you dig and the deeper you dig, the more authentic it becomes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. When you say, I love the authenticity part of this, and something you said earlier, Tim, really caught my ear. It's the idea that, people can get to know you. They can connect with you, was the word you used, connect. And the Master Connector Show, we're all about connecting people. And this is a great perspective, because I know a lot of people will say to me, because I'm a big proponent of telling your story for business purposes. When you tell your story, you connect with people, or rather they connect with you through your story. It humanizes your business. It humanizes your company. So I encourage people to tell their story, but a lot of people say, yeah, but Rob, my story is no big deal. I don't really have a great story. What would you say to a person like that, Tim? Because we know that people have valuable experiences to offer, and we know that it helps to connect. But what would you say to a person when they say, yeah, my story is no big deal, nobody wants to hear that?
Yeah, I definitely get that a lot in conversations and in networking and everything. And, my kind of answer to that is, your life story, let's say, might not be all that exciting to you because you live it day in and day out. So it's parts of it could be very repetitious, part of it's very routine. Whereas to somebody who doesn't know you or only knows you at a certain level, you sharing your story is really, to them, could be very fascinating. And it all depends on what you do. I mean, if you're a police officer, you probably have some tales of, how you saved some people, how you caught some of the bad people, put them away, some of the other, circumstances you might have been involved with. If you are, you look at like lawyers, a lot of lawyers have become fiction writers because they take a trial and they change the names and they change the town, and they're basically rewriting what happened in that trial because it's just so riveting. I mean, everybody was watching O.J. Simpson in court. Everyone was watching the Deb and her divorce case in court. I mean, we're drawn to these things. I mean, there's even a channel, Court TV. You could watch court all day long now. There's Judge Judy and People's Court, everything. So I definitely feel that, people who say my story isn't interesting, it is. You're probably just not telling it in an interesting way yet. And that's something that someone, a ghostwriter, writing coach, can definitely help you do.
Yeah, exactly. For sure. That's a great question, Rob. And I'm glad we covered that, because it is true. And by the way, still to this day, whenever I see the new, I really like the new Ford Broncos, but I always think of the OJ story when I see the Bronco on the road,
Right.
Crazy. But anyway, again, I'm probably dating myself. The 20 somethings have no clue what we're talking about here. But
OJ,
real quick before we get to the tail end, I want to give you guys a little clue here. Tim is going to be giving something away, and it's up to him, but it might be based upon who's participated the most in the comments. So you have a few minutes here before we're done. Get in the comments, because if you're the most participant, you might get something for free here. So just saying. But anyway, we're gonna wrap up here as we're all about personal growth, right? So community, type in #growth. But in the context of business success, Tim, how can an entrepreneur or entrepreneurs and professionals leverage the unique aspect of their stories, not only to humanize their brand, but to achieve significant growth and impact?
Yeah, absolutely. That's exactly what we do with business owners. We include 90 days of coaching to teach them how to do just that. A lot of people think business-wise, the ROI of a book is it costs X amount to do it, so I got to sell X amount of copies. And it has nothing at all to do with sales. It's about using that book and leveraging it to, scale your business. It's a way to meet someone that you want to meet. It's a way to land speaking engagements and, get into those conferences and be a speaker. It's about, telling your story in a way. It's kind of one thing I like to say about a book is, if I'm meeting with Rob and I'm doing a discovery call, I'm sharing some things with him. If I get him a copy of my book, I don't have to worry about if I left anything out of that conversation, because if he reads my book, he's going to get it. One of the biggest things that I tell people about a book is, when it comes to reading, the psychology of it is, we set aside time to read. We turn off our phone, we turn off our computer, we turn off the TV, we sit in our comfy chair, and for the next couple hours, we're going to read. No one says, hey, I'm going to go to Steve's website for the next 2 hours and read everything and learn about him and his business. They don't do that. I'm not going to sit and listen to the past 5 podcasts by Steve to learn about his business. Steve hands me his book. I'm going to set aside some time, maybe a couple nights during the week, and read his book. And if it takes me 3 sittings to read his book, guess what? Steve just had 3 conversations with me and he's not even there. And I'm connecting with them because I'm learning, wow, this guy struggled before he got his business off the ground, or I didn't know he did this in the service. I didn't know he volunteered here. And I'm learning about him. I'm like, man, this guy, Steve, is a great guy. Not only do I want to work with him, I want to be his friend too. It's just you're building that connection through the written word.
Yeah. I mean, I love that too, because, when we talk about humanizing it, we've heard it so often too, is that somebody will be like, something is revealed to them about a person. They'll be like, oh, I didn't know that about them. And all of a sudden they feel like there's this emotional tug, like, oh, I didn't know that. And it puts the person in a whole new light. And I think, to basically tell Tim's message, everybody needs to tell their story. And I had the good fortune of speaking with you, Tim, as you know, a couple times already. One of them talking about my book that it's going to be completed by the end of the year. And a lot of that has to do with my story and the message of that overcoming. Like when Steve talks about his overcoming, all that stuff, that's part of his story. So I know that Tim's going to be giving something away. He's going to be giving away a strategy session. So put in the comments that you have an idea for a book or you've been tossing it around. And we are going to basically raffle off a strategy session with Tim. And Tim, by the way, he's written some books of some high profile people that I know personally. So he's the real deal. It's worth about $300. So, put in there that you have an idea for a book, and we'll pick somebody out to do that strategy session with Tim, because the idea here is Tim's kind of on a mission here, and it's getting people to tell their story. And he said something, actually, I thought I came up with it. So I guess I said it after you, but you said, you don't have to have a great story. You just have to tell it in an interesting way.
Okay.
That's kind of what I tell people too, because they say the same thing to me. I'm like, look, my story is not great either, but I tell it in a more compelling manner to help influence people, to inspire them to do the same.
Exactly. I relate it to being like, if you're a stand-up comic and you're telling jokes, it's about the delivery.
Oh, delivery. Yeah.
As well as it's about that particular story where the joke lies. And, if like Chris Rock or, any of those comedians just came out and they were just telling you a story, it's probably not that funny, but they know when to pause. They know when to emphasize. Same thing in writing. You have to know when to put in the comma. You have to know when to italicize a certain word.
Absolutely. Well, this has been tremendous. We wish you could have you on. I know we talked backstage for an hour, but we are trying to keep this punchy to 30 minutes. But we're just so blessed to have you on here. But before we put you into the green room, what's the best way that Tim, for the audience, our community, to connect with you? And I highly recommend you connect with Tim. Tell them the best way that you'd like them to connect with you.
I would say, obviously I'm on LinkedIn a lot. So it's easy just to message me there, or just shoot me an email. It's just tjacobs at, what is it now? It's tjacobs at, I don't even know it now.
We'll put it in the comments later.
LinkedIn.
I'm so used to never saying it. So
yeah,
tjacobs at jacobswc.com. That's it.
There you go. Nice.
Yeah.
Or connect with them on LinkedIn. As always, we want to be connecting on LinkedIn, because this is where we make some great quality connections, and then hopefully we get a chance to meet people in other ways. So I want to thank you, Tim, for coming on here. And speaking of books, we want to pick up a copy of Steve Spiro's book, The Tao of a Master Connector. And as I alluded to earlier, Steve has a couple of different disciplines, black belts in a couple of different disciplines. So the message through here is carried out. So Steve's life is basically in print. So you can follow along Steve's journey, read Steve's thoughts through his book. So you're going to want to pick that up. We'll put that in the chat so you can do that. I highly recommend you doing that. So, if you've got an idea for a book, again, put it in the comments there that you have an idea, and maybe win that free strategy session with Tim Jacobs. He's a great guy to definitely get to know.
It would be great. And I appreciate the plug. Thank you, Rob. It's definitely a labor of love, that book. But I want to talk about next week. We've got an incredible show coming up. We were talking a little bit about impact today. So next week, same bat chime, same bat channel, back on Wednesday the 6th. We're going to be with Patrick Burns, and it is Clear Vision for Maximum Impact. It's going to be an incredible show. Make sure you register. And by the way, if this is blessing you, if this show blesses you, like we've heard so much great feedback. And again, everyone who's been here, we appreciate our community. We appreciate Stuti, Yolanda, of course, Amy, Daniel. I'm probably going to miss somebody here, so I hate doing this, but yeah, just appreciate you, Scott. I know Scott was on. Just make sure to share it out. Not only share out next week's event, but share it out. This recording. If you're watching this, by the way, on the replay, put hashtag replay. But we just love and appreciate you guys. And we're just, listen, this world is crazy, right? The good news is, as we move into this sort of now holiday season, I think what happens as a society, we tend to forget the stuff that's going on, and we focus on now, the lights, and we focus in on the joy of giving. And so it kind of it's a good distraction. But let's be honest, there are still people that are suffering out there. So let's make sure we share good feelings, good thoughts, good vibes. I love to say, if you can, I have a practice every morning. Every morning I have gratitude list, and I'm grateful for things or people. And I've heard it said also, maybe send out good thoughts to each person. So we just appreciate you. We thank you again. We're excited to be here with you, and we'll look forward to next week. Same bat chime, same bat channel. Be the light, and we're going to close with the video. Appreciate you guys big time. He challenged me. He said, you should meet 2 or 3 people every day.
We're talking about how to level up on LinkedIn and engagement, being the go-giver, the idea that being open to opportunities.
We all deal with challenges, but how do you overcome that?
Master Connector with Steve Spiro is live on air.